screen and bring up my slides for this session. It's great to have people here today, and it's super exciting to actually be talking about some of the things that go on in nominating and ways of actually being able to think about how to nominate people effectively for awards and other fellowships, both within the AVS, but also in a broader sense as well. And so we're really just going to touch on a range of different ideas and concepts as we go through today, but we're also going to talk about some of our favorite hints, tips, and tricks around good nominations and best practice in nominating people as well, and being nominated as well. So it's for both sides of the all the sides of the equation. So one of the questions we got asked in the lead up to this session was actually, why do awards matter, or do they even matter? And, you know, when we look around the world at different places, and there's things like Nobel Prizes, they obviously matter quite a lot. Medals from the President, King's Birthday Honours, University Excellence Awards, organisations like Medtronic have Barkin Fellows, and organisations like the AVS have our fellowship and membership, where we identify and recognise people for the quality and for the attributes that we actually really appreciate in our members of the society. So they are an inherent part of how we run as both technology organisations and as a society. And they're really interesting in that they allow us to recognise people. That's the whole point of the exercise. It's our peers recognising us, or our workplaces recognising our capabilities. They give us visibility, both individually in our community, but they also recognise, in some cases, some awards are actually recognition of the community as well. So they raise the profile of the community itself. And you'll see people promoting the awards they've won. You'll see communities really pushing out the types of awards and their award winners. So they can be both a profile thing, but they can also just be a recognition of values that an organisation has. And they're often used by many people as a proxy for impact. So I've had an effect, or I've been recognised for something, and it must mean I've done something really good. And generally, that's exactly what we're looking for in these types of things. Obviously, it's something new for your CV, and there's, you know, often in your CV, you'll have awards, prizes, those types of things. So as a student or as an early career researcher, awards can be really important because they're recognition from outside, generally, that you have achieved something. So there's something that you want to put into your CV. They're often recognition of somebody else thinks that I'm doing well. And that's often really valuable as well. And it's lovely to get as a human. And it's a huge ego boost. You know, if you're an early career researcher, actually, if you're me, as a, where am I in my cycle? I'm going to say mid, but probably into the middle of my career, definitely. It's lovely when people around you actually say you're doing well. And so it's not ego in a bad way. It's actually ego in a very positive way, to say you're recognised and you're valued for the properties that you bring, the part of the community that you bring, as well as obviously your scientific contributions, your community contributions as well. So they do matter, I think. And a lot of people get very wrapped up in collecting awards, and that's one of the other issues around awards, is who actually gets nominated. And one of the things we really want to emphasise today is that you have to be in it to win it, obviously. You shouldn't shy away from asking people to nominate you, because what we see a lot of the time is that the people who get nominated are just the usual suspects. They're people who are very high profile, people who have got other awards. And so we can see these cascades sometimes of, I got one award and then I'll get another award, because they're in the visibility of what people are seeing. There are people, of course, who ask to be nominated, and that's actually there's no shame in asking somebody to nominate you for an award, to identify an award and be aware of the awards that are out there that you can actually be eligible for. And what you'll find is often that people get nominated for awards because their boss previously won it, and so they're aware of the award, and that's part of that. But if you come from a group that hasn't won awards, make sure that you're looking out for the types of awards. And that's something that as the AVS we like to emphasize, is that everybody is eligible for these types of things if they fit the criteria. So nobody should be sitting back waiting for somebody to nominate them. Actually put your hand up and say, would it be possible to be nominated to somebody? There's no problem with that as well. And we want to encourage everybody to look very widely. When you look around at often nominations for awards, it can be a very narrow pool because nobody takes the effort to actually look beyond the very standard. So we want you to look and reward people around you that you value, the people who you think do really good work, who contribute to the ecosystem that you're in, the people who are change makers, who are making other people shine as well, are really important. So looking out for those awards that sometimes can recognize the contribution to a group that somebody makes. The other thing that's really important is the people who fit the specific award attributes. So there's no use of nominating somebody for an award that they don't actually fit really well into. And we'll talk a bit more about that in the session. Those people who enable, shape, influence the conversations. And that's where I think it's really something that's very interesting for people from industry, for people from government and policy places, that we really do undervalue sometimes some of those roles that people take and that have such huge influence in the types of funding that's available or the types of programs that are being created that underpin a lot of how we do our research or how we might be able to live and thrive in our local communities as well. And the other thing I really want to encourage, and I know Julia and I are both very passionate about this, is that people look beyond your standard metrics and the people who've won previous awards, that we look to the people who make a difference, and that we look beyond things that people often use, like publication numbers, grant numbers, to the people who are actually making significant contributions in other ways that are maybe a little more complicated to actually identify in the context of some of these awards as well. So it's coming back to who you value as well. As a nominator and as a nominee, you want to get the value across of your contributions in these things. And that's really what we're here today to talk about. So in selecting somebody to nominate or submitting a nomination, it's all about telling a story. As we know with pretty much everything we do, if you're writing a grant, if you're putting a pitch together for work to get a project up, you're building a story. And really the key thing is, as an academic, we always say, follow the criteria, read the syllabus is the other line here. It's follow the instructions and address the nomination questions. It's really important that you emphasize and explain the impact. And when I talk about impact has lots of meanings for different communities, but it's what is happening as a result of that person's achievements. How has the world changed because of them? Not just the number of citations they've had, though that is a type of impact, but also what has changed as a result of the work that they do. Put it into the context of their field. So, for example, this person has created these policies, the government has implemented, there's been this much funding, and we've now seen a huge change in the number of people who participate in early career research or opportunities, and that's changed that for PhD students across the country. They're the types of impact statements that you want to have. You want to put some numbers around it. You want to talk about their career opportunities and their role. So it's getting beyond this was their job and they did it well to this is their job, they did it really well, and these are the angles that they came at it differently, or this is the way the world changed as a result. You are telling the story and explaining this person to the judges. The judges want to hear a fabulous story, I can tell you now. When you get a great story in an application, it's a delight. It's easy to read. It's like reading a book. You're hooked on the first chapter and you're in and you're like wanting to know more. And you're following and you're looking at this application going, oh, I'd really love to support this person. And that's the sort of vibe you want to get out of an application. It's much, much easier rather than I'm digging through this application trying to find out if they meet the criteria. It's obvious they meet the criteria. That's why it's really important that you look at the criteria and bring them together. You make it easy for the judges to see those criteria in the application. Often in an application, what will happen is you've got sections and people will actually look at the sections and they'll write 3 lines. And you're like, yep, okay, they're nice, they're 3 lines, but do they tell a story? Do they explain what the situation was beforehand? Do they explain what changed as a result of this action? It's not just a bunch of facts, it's a story. You can read a bunch of facts in somebody's CV. This is building the glow that comes around it. It's the sparkle, for want of a better term, that goes around the person and gives us insight into their individuality. And so this is a really good example, I think, of how that difference comes. So you've got insight on this side here where we've said it's not impactful. It's like, it's true. They served as a department chair for 12 years. They generated 15 company patents and they served on 9 committees. But it's not telling us what changed, what they achieved in that role, anything about that. They're just bare facts. It doesn't say anybody could have been the department chair and yes, they were the department chair, but nothing changed while they were in that role. So what happened while they were in that role? What was new? What was different? And so what we're looking for is that story so that we can see here on the other side where we've got impactful. It's initiating the concept, secured the funding, oversaw the construction, brought people with them, aligned all of these other people to create this. The impact of the patents, it's created company sales, it's, changed the way patients get blood flow. It's really looking beyond the facts to the detail and the story and the sparkle that comes around this person. It should reflect how you, as a nominator, why you thought this person should be nominated. It's what do you appreciate about them, or what do you know about them, or what do people value of their contribution, and how does that come together as well. And so what we're trying to get to is what differentiates this person from others. And it's not a humble brag, it's actually just giving us a sense of who they are, what they mean, and how they have made a difference. And that's what all awards are about, is really about valuing the contributions people make. So the things that we look for when we're getting judgy on people, and I've got to say, it's a huge privilege to be a judge on awards. I do a lot of this type of work, and it's a delight to see both the effort that people place in nominating people, but also to read about how people have contributed. So you want to understand the very specific things that they've achieved, but also where they've contributed to a broader story. So their citizenship is often really good. What makes that person unique? What are they passionate about? What do they lead? What have they done? And so one of the things that comes about is what environment did they build that allows others to thrive as well, so that we're not talking about just a one pillar in something that is so far above everybody else that nobody else can keep up, but it's the pieces around they enable, or they have supported so many fellowships, or they have built an environment where others thrive. Those types of things are the points that make somebody quite unique, often in an award system. I talked about impact earlier. It's what does the research, the product, the policy that they've created, is it being used? So often as an academic, we think about citations, but we can get beyond citations. We can get to patents. We can also get to how many dollars, how many students trained, where have they gone? You can have impact in so many different ways that it's really exciting to see, actually, in a nomination, somebody who's having impact in a way you'd never thought of. It might be a social enterprise. It might be providing a lot of training. All these other things are really important parts of the story. They're not necessarily, depending on the award system, they might be the reason they're being nominated, but it's bringing that story out and talking about what has changed or what will change as a result of what they've done. So you've got different stages in that impact journey as well. And for some senior people, you'll be able to see the entire journey. For more junior staff, you'll be able to point to how things will change, or how things have changed in the early stage and where it's going to go. You're helping the judges to understand what the impact is. And then the other aspects of the candidate as well. So what are they doing in terms of service, in terms of mentoring? How are they impacting or influencing industry? How are they creating standards or policy influence? So much of the field that we work in AVS is driven by standards and expectations and the things that help us to be successful as researchers, but also as an industry, and those standards bring us together. We don't probably recognise the value of standards and policy enough, and we're very keen to do more of that. You can emphasise the contributions of the nominee to their community as well. Often we think about awards as singular or as a very isolated thing. This person is fabulous in their own right, but it's how do they, what's the environment they build? Do they have local impact? Do they have global impact? It isn't an either or. Some people are very focused on impact in their local environment, whereas others will be having a global impact. It's not that there's a preference to one or the other, it's that it exists. And of course, coming back to read the syllabus, make sure that you really understand the specific award criteria and requirements, that you highlight how they meet the application and how they meet the specific goals and attributes of that award as well. It's pointless nominating somebody for an award where they're sort of aligned to it. You will not necessarily get that across very well, and it won't fit the criteria all that well. There'll be people who are nominated who will fit it better. Okay, so one thing to think about here is that it's exactly the same as a pitch. You're pitching this person to the judges. So you can think about it in terms of intellectual merit. What did the person do? Why is it important? Why is it relevant for this award? But it's also about how did the person enable those outcomes or the impact? Building that trajectory, you know, for students and for early career researchers, we're often talking about where they're going to get to and the foundations that they're building, you know, the evidence that we have that they're doing really well and they're going to be a future leader, or that this product is, if it's from industry or policy, that this has started well, we're branching it out, it started in this state, it's branching out now, and it's going to be global, and we can start to see that trajectory building, and we want to recognize something early in its cycle. But it's also about how, in some cases, there's been a sustained high level of contribution. So when we look to fellowships, that's never going to be about a single thing that somebody's done. That's going to be about they have contributed over a longer period of time, and they collect a value to the community as well. The other thing here is to really get into those broader impacts. It's what more does this person do? What are they passionate about? What do they drive in the background? So this is also the opportunity to bring in teaching and training and things that they do in a broader sense as well, so that it's almost like they do this and this and this, and they do all of these other things, so really being able to say, and there's more in an award nomination is really good as well. It's giving everybody that sense that this person is well-rounded. They're not, I always think about it, they're not doing a Harry Potter living under the stairs. They are part of something, and they're part of a community as well. So I think those ideas that you get across are very important here at this stage too. So one of the things that I'm really passionate about, and that we're bringing in as the AVS a lot more focus on, and really want to encourage people to look around, is how we encourage and enable people from industry and government sectors to be competitive in these types of awards. It's very simple. It's very simple to use the shorthand of publications, grant income, and citations as the shorthand for an award. But when we look at industry and government sectors, we know that there is a wide range of other attributes and other capabilities that have got to be displayed. So in many cases, people are leading teams within a company or a government agency. And so rather than undertaking the research themselves, their impact lies in the commercial outcomes, the new products, the new dollars, the new markets, the development of technologies that underpin a research sector in some cases, but more broadly, the employment outcomes, the team successes as well, growing a team to a certain scale, getting new products, new processes, changing the way every company does something, or enabling that type of work. And that in the government domain, it's really that development and delivery of changes in policy and funding, in culture. So these could be any number of ways of industry and government working together, industry and academia working together, the way that we fund really moving forward. When we look at the things like quantum and so many of these areas that are enabled by people in government coming together and going, this is really important, we need to get behind it. They're the types of things that we want to be able to support. We want to be able to recognise the value of those contributions to our different communities. It's really important that no matter who you are nominating, you get beyond the H-index, their citations or their grant income, to the outcomes of that work. And so really being able to explain the specific role, the context, their leadership is really important in most award nominations as well. So when we start to think about impact, to get beyond those publications and grants and invited talks, it's really about, are they influencing industry? Are they leading partnerships and scale in new and different ways of training people and skills development, bringing more diverse groups into and as part of our communities as well? Are they changing the standards, enabling changes in standards, doing the white papers, creating entire new scientific fields? Is totally a part of this, and it might be the early stage or a new advancement. Are they growing really dynamic teams and who are succeeding as well? Are they really getting to the heart of the foundations that underpin questions that are required to be answered across the for the whole sector to thrive? And then also, is there global reach and influence? Are they advancing new scientific communities in America, in Europe, across the globe? How do they bring these things together? Now, there's a lot to take in on a slide like this, and you'll be able to come back after these talks and see these slides on the AVS website as well, and come back and just ask yourself those questions. I think this is a really good checklist to go through and say, well, could this person, what have they done? And giving you a bit more structure as you go to write a nomination as well. But the really important thing here is that we, as the AVS, and I think pretty much every awards grouping here now, is looking for excellent and diverse nominations. We love reading something different. It's so much more fun to read a new and different type of nominee. And so as we expand at the AVS, we want to really have our pool of nominees reflect all the people who contribute to the AVS as well. Now, in saying that, I want to hand over to Julia to talk about the actual nomination process and a few other matters around how to get good letters. Over to you, Julia.
Thank you, Sally. So I do want to say one consistent conclusion you can make between what Sally has said and what I'm going to say. We're making your job harder. It is actually harder to produce a nomination package, write letters of recommendations if you take our advice. But if you're going to go to the work of doing it, it's much more satisfying to do it, really optimizing the chance for the person you're nominating to be successful. One of the things I'm going to emphasize is in recent years, there's been a lot of big data research on how credit is given, how we tend to default to prestige, how ideas diffuse out among the scientific community. And at UNM, I do a lot of workshops on faculty hiring, annual review, and promotion and tenure for faculty and chairs and deans. And the longer I do this, the more it becomes apparent that a lot of the things we're talking about here, they influence all different points of careers, and they are impacting you and you can impact them. So some of these are things you can think about in other contexts beyond nominating people. So Sally's done a great job of talking about impact, and I will emphasize that there's a lot of biases that come into this process in terms of how we perceive people and who gets nominated. People at, as Sally has been mentioning, government positions, industry at our 2 or 4-year schools have different opportunities to contribute. But these are valuable opportunities and we want to look for them. The other thing I'm going to say too is for nomination committees, the chair of the committees really need to be thinking about creating an environment where people are comfortable changing their minds, particularly for things like student awards, where there can be a huge number of them. It's really easy to just space out on some of them and miss things. And then when other people are discussing, going, oh, I didn't see that. And you want to be able to give everyone the grace to kind of go, oh, you're right. I need to rethink how I'm evaluating this person. Next slide. You're driving. Okay. So there's been a lot of research from Aaron Closet, Daniel Larimore, and their colleagues on institutional prestige and gender patterns in faculty hiring in the US. And it is such a huge influence. I think it's important for people to appreciate. 80% of faculty with PhDs in the US trained at just 20% of the universities. And I guarantee you, some of the universities not in that 20% are training some really excellent people. And in fact, 1 in 8 faculty were trained at just 5 universities. And this tends to be pretty consistent across fields. So doctoral granting institution prestige is the largest predictor of placement. It isn't productivity. However, productivity after 5 years in a faculty position doesn't correlate with the prestige of your PhD granting institution. What does correlate is the resources available to you when you start that position. So their conclusion over and over is we've got universally extreme inequality in faculty production. Other ways institutional prestige impacts how we perceive things is ideas diffuse out more quickly from institutions viewed as high prestige. So kind of average advancements diffuse more quickly than really creative work happening at institutions that are viewed at sort of the periphery. So these are really helpful things to keep in mind as you're evaluating opportunities people may have had and things they've been able to accomplish. Next slide. I want to make sure I do this. This is a huge study. 9,700 research teams composed of 128,800 researchers between 2013 and 2016 found that women were less likely than men to be named as authors on articles. And it gets worse. Stop there. Leave it alone. And it's worse if articles with more citations, the teams were less likely to credit women. They are much less likely to be named on patents. And this study controlled for a wide range of factors. And distressingly, it's based on pre-pandemic data. So it's only gotten worse post-pandemic. Next slide. Depending on where you are, the attitude may very much be that everything's fine, we're done. This is not, in fact, the case. The disruptions for COVID-19 were really highly variable depending on individual situations, the type of research people doing, how the institution responded. UNM, for example, went to remote operations for 18 months, longer than most R1s. And people couldn't get in their lab except to do very, very basic urgent things for months. Lots of people lost cell lines or other long-term research. I continue to hear from new faculty about equipment delays. There's still supply chain delays. It's still taking longer to get articles and book proposals reviewed. There are some journals publishing more quickly, and there are other journals which have much, much longer delay times for publishing. So these are broadly impacting people, but there are studies from both the National Academies and NIH that show that women and BIPOC scholars were far more heavily impacted. And anyone who was a caregiver, either childcare or elder care, family or chosen family, was impacted. And I know, for example, in Albuquerque, there's still not as much childcare as there was pre-pandemic. So this is still something young parents, early career people are struggling with. Next slide. Yeah, okay. There are also studies that have shown that letters of recommendation, independent of whether they are written by men or women, tend to vary depending on the gender of the person they are about. So letters for men tend to be longer. They tend to have more references to things that speak to impact, like accomplishments, publications, how they've collaborated with colleagues, and they tend to use all the standout adjectives that we think about. Letters for women can be shorter. They tend to use the more sort of work-like adjectives in terms of being hardworking or conscientious or responsible. They may have more references to personal life, like whether or not they have kids, whether or not they're a good parent. The quotes here are all things people have seen. Well, it appears her health is stable now. So they raise irrelevant points, but that can really impact how people are evaluating the letter. And this is something everyone I worked with when we started learning about this research years ago, it impacted how we all write letters. So this is something to keep in mind, whether you're writing letters or reading letters. And if we look at the next slide, we'll pursue this a little more. Obviously, good letters point out the strengths of the candidate and use specific examples rather than that they're great. They can identify things that we're not going to be able to tell from the CV, whether they've been a leader on a project, if it's about a grad student, that they really contributed heavily to a proposal that was funded. These are, and they can allow us to start to be able to look at the opportunities in light of achievement. A graduate student working for a new assistant professor has very different opportunities than a grad student joining an established large research group with lots of research support. People working at R2 or 4 years, maybe doing really great things for local communities and mentoring students and providing students on the undergraduate level with research opportunities. And these are all things that can be highlighted. It is also important to remember that whoever wrote the letter, their biases are going to color what they choose to write or not write. Sometimes they're written by the candidates themselves. And, they may go into things that aren't relevant, but start to color how people read it. One of my favorite instances from a hiring workshop at UNM when we were discussing letters, one of the engineering departments had a search years ago for which 3 members of the same research group applied, all of whom, according to the letters written by the advisor, were the best student the advisor had ever had. So for letters of recommendation to have meaning, they really need to have details highlighting what the person has done, what their impact has been, rather than saying they're the best ever or just, providing the quantitative metrics, because that doesn't really tell the story. And as Sally was saying, in general, committees want to say yes. Obviously, they can't say yes to all of the nominees, but helping them get to yes is really figuring out how to tell a story that's backed up with some evidence and data. Next slide. So some overall tips. Please get letters from people who actually know the nominee or are familiar with the area in which they've worked. I think nominators should tell the different letter writers what to focus on so that different aspects of the person's contributions can be covered effectively and a more complete story is given. So this means you want to find people who know the person in different roles. If you can also get people from internet who know them in different contexts, from international reviewers, that's really helpful. There are big cultural differences in terms of how letters of recommendation are written in different countries, and that's just something else to keep in mind. Letters from the US tend to frequently be more glowing and over the top, and from some other areas, they may be more realistic to the point where they start to sound negative, even though they are in fact extremely supportive. So the nominator has a lot of work to do to try and make sure the different letters cover different issues and don't just repeat things. The letters don't need to summarize what's in the CV because the nominator should have done that. And the more information you can provide the letter writers about what's going to be in the nominating letter and what you specifically need them to do, then the stronger package you can put together. And next slide. So if you're the nominator, you want to try and give people time to write good letters and for you to put together a coherent story. I really like this cartoon. It's how a lot of us work, whether we're doing nomination letters or evaluating award nominations. But in point of fact, there's also a lot of research that shows we default to very basic schemas in terms of our implicit biases and just things that we're comfortable with. If we are working under tight time constraints by ourselves without sufficient data to make informed decisions. And if this sounds like most of the decisions you make in terms of hiring and evaluating awards, that's right. So taking time can lead to more holistic presentations of candidates and evaluations of nominees. I know there was a question about how you get a CV confidentially or secretly without the nominee knowing it, but the nominee can know you're working on it. And in many cases, unless the award specifically is supposed to be a surprise, you want them to know. Some universities, for example, have very specific CV formats that are required that are not helpful for award nominations because of the way they're organized. And you may need to work with the nominee to have them reorganize at least the first couple of pages of their CV so the high impact work that they have accomplished stands out and is accessible to the the review committee and as part of the package. Yeah, I'll just emphasize, so be creative about how you think about impact. There is absolutely no doubt this is harder than just summarizing the quantitative information, but it should allow us as a society to broaden the scope and type of work and people working broadly in different important areas and their contributions. And I think I turn it back to Sally at this point.
Thank you so much, Julia. And I was just going to comment on that. If you're going to go to the effort of nominating someone, the thinking that you put into why you want to nominate them is actually really important because, again, you're going to take the effort to pull this together, so you may as well make it fabulous. One of the other areas I was going to say that you can often get a lot of information, and it depends on the person, but increasingly LinkedIn is a fantastic way of getting a sense of what are some of the other things that somebody does. But also that's a great place to have a look at who they're connected to if you're looking for who to ask to support those nominations as well, because you get a sense of who they're connected to at the same time. So if I go to the final piece for today is I want to take the opportunity to reinforce how many opportunities we have for awards at the AVS. We have our national awards, which are all of our national professional awards. We have national student awards, technical awards, and the society honours, the fellowships. But also within the organisation, we have division and group professional awards, student awards, focus topic awards, and different scholarships. So there are so many places for people to be recognised and supported through many of these awards. Many of these awards come with cash dollars, which is rather nice, but also with the recognition of the society and the chance to actually be able to say that people who are in your field think that you're doing well. And so we have an awards process. The awards are due for the professional awards on the 31st of March. So we have a month. And giving it that it is, well, in Australia at least, it's the 1st of March. You guys are still on your leap day. In America, the student award nominations, you have more time. It's May 13th. And those student award nominations are super exciting in that we go through to an interview process. We select our top 8 candidates from our reviewing process, and then the students have a chance to actually present talks to us and have a discussion with the panel members. You can look at all of the different awards packages and information on the website. And all of these awards are reviewed by the AVS trustees that I had the privilege of chairing the AVS trustees last year and being a trustee for the previous 3 years. But we, as a group, love getting really great nominations and having a hard time deciding between fabulous nominations as well. And then we announce all the award winners in a very detailed and internationals at the International Symposium each year in fall or autumn. And so that's a great celebration of everybody who's won these awards as well. So there are focal points. As I said, you need to understand the syllabus. So the types of things that are different awards. So we have AVS Fellows, who are recognised for their scientific, technical, policy and governmental contributions and service, with an emphasis on service to the AVS, as well as our broader community. And so we're really encouraging those candidates from government, research and policy agencies, the standards organisations and industry to apply to be fellows. We've got the details, as I've talked about today, on some of the ways that you can highlight the contributions from people from non-academic backgrounds as well. And we're really encouraging people from academic backgrounds who are more diverse as well to actually apply for fellowship. We have the Mark, the Welsh and the Langmuir Awards, which are focused on scientific and engineering excellence that are of relevance to any of the AVS technical areas. The Thornton Award, which is specifically for thin films and plasma contribution. One of my favourites, the Hanyo, which is for a technical support role. So this is a really exciting one where we have the ability to recognise somebody who's had a very strong impact on a team, as well as their support and mentorship in their community. So this can apply really nicely to instrumentation developers and suppliers, to technical staff and service providers as well. So it's one that is very specific for that technical support role. And of course, those students awards as well. And it's the contribution of the student to the community, and their community engagement is also a key part of that. So great researcher doing all the right things as a student, but also what are they contributing back to the environment that they're in. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open up for questions from the audience. And in the chat, we've got the ability for people to put questions in, or I think, Angela, people are able to open up their microphone and ask us questions, but if there's any questions from the audience as well.
You can also enter any questions in the Q&A box as well.
I might ask a question of Julia. Julia, you've seen a lot of nominations where people damn with faint praise. Do you want to give some examples of where it seems nice, but you're not actually getting the idea across very well, like people that damning with faint praise sort of point?
I've seen a lot talking about people being responsible and collaborative without ever giving examples.
Right. Yep.
Having a great sense of humor. Nice to know. I value it, but
yeah. And so there's sort of these superfluous ideas that don't actually add value. I think the other one here is, statements without backup or evidence or exemplars. So it's really about, if you're going to make a statement, have an example. It's the reference point. You know, you wouldn't write it in a paper without a reference. Here's the reference that gives you the story around these things as well.
I'm also really mixed on statements about what great time management skill women have had in grad school or as assistant professors because they're such great parents.
Yes.
In addition to their accomplishments. And
yes,
all praise to them, but that undermines the main points.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, we do have a few questions in the Q&A.
Yep, great. And I've got one here that's about, I'm an AVS chapter chair. Am I eligible for an early career award nomination? In terms of the AVS rules, I would make sure that you check that all the guides are in the rules. The different chapters may have different rules in terms of divisions having different rules. Generally, you would always be eligible, but I know as a trustee, I can't nominate people. So they're the things just to keep an eye on. And the other thing is, I should say, if you are nominating somebody, you can only nominate one person a year for any of the individual awards. You can nominate people in different categories, but you can only nominate one person per category. That's actually really important to remember. So we've got, if no guidance is given, how long should the nomination packages be? Okay, the really important thing is it is not about the length of the package, it's about the content of the package. If you can get your ideas across succinctly and clearly, and the emphasis is there, less is more. Because you've got to remember, put yourself in the shoes of the person who is doing the judging and has to read every nomination. If you're reading a lot of very long nominations, you will lose the will to live. So the quality rather than the quantity. It's really important that you're succinct, that you're not just filling up space. You know, you're given 500 words, but if you can say it in 200, please say it in 200. So be as succinct as you can. Don't make them long for the sake of it. From Bridget, how do you go about getting letters from people in a timely manner that just don't restate the CV? Julia, I'm going to give you that one because I think that's one of yours.
I think that's an excellent question. And there's no great answer. I think some of it is contacting people early. I routinely only get given a week or sometimes less to write letters, and it makes me angry. So I think someone is trying to give people advance time, trying to give them some bullets on things you would like them to focus on or include. If you don't exactly have the examples, but could you provide some examples based on your knowledge of their activities in the X area? Perhaps explicitly telling them not to restate the CV, because most people are going to assume that's part of what they're supposed to do. It's not an irrational assumption, but maybe reiterating. And then, of course, also setting a false deadline, so that you really need it at X. If you started early, then you can give them a deadline that's earlier than you actually need it, so that you can pull together a strong package and maybe even have time to iterate on it. I think part of the problem is that I'm sure you're alluding to is getting the letter so late it's too late to do anything. So, I mean, it's all the psychological tricks you can think of to get people to give you the letter when you actually need it.
Yeah, I agree. There's nothing worse as somebody who's asking you to write a letter with no notice, and particularly when you haven't seen what they've written in the actual application. So the other thing I think that's really important as a nominator is to share with the people who you're asking to nominate. And it's interesting. Do you provide a draft nomination to the letter writers? You could, or I think the other way of doing it is the reverse, is asking them to highlight the key points they'd like to have in a letter and then helping them shape it, giving them a draft at that stage so that you're actually taking their angle, not giving them, because the other problem with giving people letters is that you're not allowing them to make, and they will just sign it because the timeline is tight if you're not careful. And letters are very universal.
I think the question is, do you give a draft of the nomination to the letter writers?
Yes. Sorry, yes, that is actually, yes, that is a great idea. I would always give that, because you could also highlight for them areas that they might like to emphasize then in that nomination. The other piece is that and I'm doing this a lot at the moment in Australia with an award scheme that we have for fellowships. And it's really about remembering that people see different people from different angles. So you might only experience somebody from meeting them at a conference. You don't see them in the teaching setup. So don't ask somebody who's never seen that person teach to comment on that person's teaching. Think about that distribution of how those ideas come together, because they're going to make much more sense. Somebody commenting on the teaching who lives in the UK on somebody working in the US probably isn't the right way to go about it. So the work you do as a nominator, one of the things, as Julia said, we don't want to make your job even harder, but it is an important role, and don't underestimate the work that needs to go into the nomination process. Again, that's another reason why planning ahead is really important, because it will sneak up behind you, and actually you'll run out of time, to be guaranteed.
The other reason to provide a draft of the nomination is the letter writers may be able to help you strengthen it. They may have other insights that can help strengthen it that you might not be aware of.
Absolutely. And sometimes, as you know, with writing a paper or anything else we do, writing a grant, it's another set of eyes actually saying, oh, you haven't mentioned this, or this doesn't come across in quite the way you think it is. And so that's really important as well. Are there any other questions from anybody? Now, while anybody's thinking of any final questions they might want to make, obviously today, this presentation and this whole this discussion will be uploaded onto the AVS website, so you can always come back, share with your friends, tell them how fabulous we are. You know, I'm getting ready for awards here. It's really important. And I want to just re-emphasize and thank everybody for taking the time to join us today. We have another question. Writing nominations for industrial nominees is really difficult. How do you quantify impact when a lot of what happens is in-house and not discussed openly? And I think, yeah, that's a really interesting challenge here. I think it is about getting to the heart of the scale of the company and understanding the role they take in that company. You don't have to disclose the private business of the company, obviously, but that's where your letter writers and your grouping of people together to say, well, what can we say about this person? It's the recognition that this person is valuable as the starting point, and then the gathering. So for anybody from industry or government, I think it's really important to gather a group of people together to talk about how you can highlight, what you can pull out, what other factors you can bring together. And you can get to the point of talking about the scale of the company, their role in developing the people in that company. It doesn't have to be on all the details of technical insight as well. It is challenging, but I don't think that should stop us from actually making the effort. And I would really encourage people from industry to actually think about what are the things that people can be talking about, and talking in our communities about how to pull together better applications. I've given some suggestions today on things that you might be able to pull in. But Julia, did you have any other thoughts on that one?
I think, for some of these, it's really important that colleagues who are, at the company in the same division or interacting with the person, like at the local AVS chapter, it's really finding the people who see them in that environment and can figure out things that can be written about.
Yeah. I think we focus on what's hard rather than what's possible. So we need to get to the what is possible here. What can I say about this person other than all the things I can't say about them, I think, as well. Well, if there's no further questions, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Julia, for joining me on this adventure.
Thank
And
you.
thank you to the PLC for inviting us to do this presentation, and good luck with your nominating.
And it's not too early to think about next year. If you're sitting here going, oh, I don't know if I can do this by the end of March, they all come around again next year, or most of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, and Sally and Julia for presenting such a valuable webinar, and you gave us a lot of good information. As we've been discussing, AVS has a comprehensive awards program that recognizes individuals for their accomplishments, and the names of the awards are listed on your screen. Please scan the code or go to our website under awards to review the criteria and eligibility requirements for each award and to see the list of current and past awardees. Please consider nominating a peer or colleague today. Please be sure to check out the membership options and benefits at avs.org under the membership tab, which includes registration discounts on short courses, technical webinars, access to the publications and technical libraries, and other career services. Please consider getting involved with AVS today. Thank you once again for joining us.